the Apache woman who was given away as punishment, and ended up finding true love. Maka was born in a small Apache village, tucked between the rolling hills and wide, open plains where the wind seemed to tell stories to anyone who would listen. From a young age, she had a spark in her eyes, a curious light that made her different from the other children. While they were content to follow the paths laid out before them, Maka wanted to explore. She would climb the tallest rocks, wander near the riverbanks, and watch the birds soar above her with wonder in her heart. Her laughter was like the sound of wind chimes, and her smile could lift the spirits of anyone who was near. Her parents, though proud of her courage and intelligence, often worried. "Maka," her mother would say softly, "the world is not always kind to those who walk their own path." But Maka could not help herself. She wanted to know, to see, to feel everything the world had to offer. She spent hours listening to the elders' stories, watching the way they spoke, the wisdom hidden in every word, and she asked questions that sometimes made the adults pause. Her curiosity, however, often led her into trouble. One afternoon, during a gathering at the village, she noticed a small child drop a basket of food near the edge of the gathering ground. Without thinking, Maka rushed forward to help, but in doing so, she accidentally knocked over a decorated clay pot that was meant for a sacred ceremony. The elders were furious. The elders were respected in the community, their words like law, and Maka could see the disappointment in their eyes. She tried to explain that she only meant to help, but they shook their heads, their faces stern. "Your actions have consequences, Maka," one elder said quietly but firmly. "Even when you mean well, there is a proper way to behave. You must learn this before it is too late." Maka bowed her head, feeling the weight of shame she had never known before. Her parents tried to comfort her later, but even their gentle words could not erase the feeling of being misunderstood. Days passed, and Maka tried harder to follow the rules, but it seemed no matter how careful she was, her spirit kept nudging her toward mischief. She would speak up when she thought something unfair was happening, and she would explore places she was told to avoid. The elders, concerned for both her safety and the order of the village, decided that a more serious punishment was needed, not out of cruelty, but out of a belief that it would guide her onto the right path. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maka's father approached her quietly. "Maka," he said, taking her hands in his, "the elders have decided that you will stay with another family for a time. It is not because we do not love you, but because they believe it will help you understand the ways of our people better." Maka felt her heart clench. She could not imagine leaving her home, her parents, her friends, and the small joys of her everyday life. The next morning, Maka's few belongings were packed carefully in a small bundle. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "Remember who you are, Maka. You are strong, kind, and brave. No distance can change that." Her father pressed a small, worn stone into her hand, a talisman of protection, saying, "This will remind you of home when you feel lost." Maka nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, and for the first time she felt the true meaning of leaving something she loved behind. The journey to the neighboring settlement was long and quiet. Maka walked beside a young man who was sent to accompany her, his expression respectful but distant. The land stretched endlessly, with wide plains that seemed to go on forever. She thought about the life she was leaving, the laughter of children, the smell of the cooking fires, the songs that rose in the evenings, and the warmth of her family. Each step felt heavier than the last, and yet she could not turn back. When she arrived at the new settlement, Maka was met with curious eyes and cautious smiles. The family she was to stay with was different from her own in many ways. Their home was smaller, the way they spoke was slightly different, and their daily routines were unfamiliar. At first, Maka felt like an outsider. She tried to help with chores, but her hands moved differently, and her suggestions, though well-meaning, were often met with polite correction. She felt the sting of isolation keenly, missing the easy warmth of her own people. The first night was the hardest. She lay on a straw mat, listening to unfamiliar sounds, the wind rustling differently through the trees, the distant calls of animals she had never heard. Tears came unbidden, and she thought about her mother's gentle words and the stone she carried in her hand. Clutching it, she whispered a promise to herself that she would endure, that she would learn, and that somehow she would find a way to shine even here. Over the following days, Maka began to notice small details about her new surroundings. She watched how the family moved through their routines, the laughter they shared over small meals, the way they tended to the animals. Though she was still treated as someone who had been sent as a punishment, her natural kindness and curiosity slowly drew the attention of a few family members. A young girl, not much younger than Maka, began to show her small acts of friendship, sharing a piece of bread or whispering secrets. A kind older woman allowed Maka to help with cooking, offering gentle guidance instead of sharp corrections. Maka's spirit, though tested, did not break. She learned to adapt, to observe before acting, to listen more than she spoke. But in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, she would climb to a hill behind the settlement, look at the horizon, and imagine the life she had left behind. She imagined her parents, faces, the songs of her people, and the gentle sway of the trees near her home. She felt both sadness and hope in equal measure, sadness for what was lost, and hope that perhaps, in this new place, there was a life waiting for her that she could not yet see. It was during these quiet moments that Maka discovered her own inner strength. She realized that though she was far from home, though she had been sent away as punishment, she still had control over her actions and her heart. She could choose to be angry, or she could choose to learn. She could dwell on the injustice of her situation, or she could find small joys in the new life she had been given. Slowly, she began to explore the fields, to speak with neighbors, to offer help without expecting anything in return. Each small act of kindness, each moment of courage, made her feel a little more at home. And so, Maka's journey began, not just the journey to a new home, but the journey within herself. She carried with her the memory of her family, the lessons of her people, and a determination to rise above the circumstances that had been imposed upon her. Though the path was uncertain, and though she missed the world she had known, Maka discovered that she had a resilience that no punishment could take away. In the quiet of the evenings, as stars lit the sky, she would hold the stone her father had given her and whisper a promise. That one day she would find her place in the world, a place where she could be herself, and perhaps even find a heart that understood hers. Maka had been living in her new home for several weeks now. The initial shock of being taken from her village had faded slightly, replaced by a quiet determination to adapt. She learned the daily rhythms of her new household, the early mornings when the family rose to tend the animals, the warmth of the fire during cooking, and the long afternoons filled with work in the fields. Each day brought challenges, but also small victories. She discovered the names of the animals, learned how to carry water carefully without spilling, and even began to memorize the songs and stories of this new place. Despite these small successes, Maka often felt invisible. Though some members of the household treated her with kindness, others saw her as a burden, a reminder of the punishment imposed by her elders. The older children whispered behind her back, sometimes mocking her accent or the way she carried herself. Maka tried not to let it hurt her, but some nights, when the house was silent, tears would come anyway. She missed the laughter of her own friends, the songs her mother sang, and the gentle guidance of the elders who, though strict, had cared for her deeply. The hardest moments were during mealtime. Sitting with a family that barely knew her, she often felt the weight of their eyes, silently judging her every movement. She tried to be helpful, setting the table and fetching water, but no matter how careful she was, She often heard quiet sighs or small complaints. "She is still learning," one of the younger women would whisper, but the tone was not warm. It carried impatience, a reminder that Maka was an outsider. One afternoon, as Maka carried a heavy bucket of water from the river, she stumbled over a root hidden in the grass. The bucket tipped, spilling water everywhere. Frustrated, she wiped her hands on her skirt and looked up to see the young boy from the household staring at her, his lips pressed tightly together. She expected a scolding, perhaps even laughter, but instead he nodded once as if to say, "It's all right. Everyone makes mistakes." That small gesture, so simple yet so kind, made her chest swell with relief. She realized that kindness could be found in unexpected places, even here, far from home. Gradually, Maka began to explore the surrounding area more. She walked along the riverbanks, collecting stones and feathers, marveling at the way sunlight danced on the water. She ventured into the fields, watching the crops sway in the wind. And sometimes she would sit quietly on a hill, looking at the horizon, imagining her village in the distance. These moments of solitude became her refuge, times when she could breathe, think, and remember who she was. It was during one of these walks that she first noticed Tomas. He was older than the children in the household, a young man who often helped his family with the larger tasks, repairing fences, guiding the animals, and carrying supplies from the market. He noticed Maka the way she noticed the world, quietly, with a patient gaze. At first, they exchanged only polite nods, brief smiles that lingered for a heartbeat longer than expected. Maka felt a flutter of curiosity and something unfamiliar, a warmth she had not experienced in weeks. Over time, Tomas began to speak with her during their small encounters. He asked about the river, the stones she collected, and the birds she watched. He did not rush her answers or mock her stories. He listened with genuine interest. Maka, who had spent so long feeling invisible and misunderstood, was startled by how comforting it felt to be heard. She began to look forward to these moments, the simple conversations that made the long days feel lighter. But life in the settlement was not without its challenges. Some family members grew suspicious of Maka's growing bond with Tomas. Whispers spread that she was becoming too bold, too confident, and too curious. She should focus on learning her place, one woman said under her breath. Maka overheard these words and felt the familiar sting of shame and frustration. She reminded herself to stay patient, to continue being helpful, and to prove her worth through her actions rather than words. Maka also struggled with homesickness. She missed her parents more than she had expected. At night, she would clutch the stone her father had given her and whisper stories of her childhood into the dark. She remembered her mother teaching her how to weave, her father showing her how to track animals in the fields, and the laughter of children chasing each other around the village. Those memories were bittersweet, bringing both comfort and longing. Yet they also reminded her of her resilience. She had survived being sent away as punishment. She could survive this too. Despite the difficulties, Maka found small joys. She learned to bake bread with the older woman who patiently guided her hands. She discovered the songs of this settlement, learning their rhythms and harmonies, and she began to teach them the songs from her own village in return. The children, once wary, slowly began to accept her. Some would run alongside her in the fields, laughing at the games she taught them, while others would ask her to tell stories of her village. With each passing day, Maka felt a little less like an outsider and a little more like a part of this new world. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Maka was walking to the river to collect water when she saw Tomas struggling to carry a heavy bundle of firewood. Without thinking, she ran to help him, grabbing one end of the bundle and lifting it with him. Tomas laughed, a deep, genuine sound, and together they carried the firewood to the house. That simple act of working side by side brought a new closeness between them. They began to share small jokes, teasing each other lightly, and Maka felt her heart open in ways she had never expected. Even as their friendship grew, Maka remained cautious. She knew that her situation was delicate, and she did not want to give anyone reason to criticize her or Tomas. She continued to work hard, helping the household in every way she could, showing respect for the traditions of this new family while also holding onto her own identity. It was a delicate balance, but Maka was determined to maintain it. One evening, as she sat by the fire, Tomas joined her quietly. He handed her a small wooden carving, something he had made during the day. "I thought you might like this," he said softly. Maka turned it over in her hands, marveling at the care and skill that had gone into it. She felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling that she could not fully name, but that made her smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." In that moment, Maka realized that even in a place where she had felt so out of place, connections could form and hearts could reach across distance and difference. As weeks turned into months, Maka's confidence grew. She learned to navigate the complexities of her new home, understanding when to speak and when to observe, when to act and when to wait. She became skilled at her daily chores, earned the respect of many in the household, and found small moments of happiness in her interactions with Tomas and the children. She discovered that even in a situation that had begun as a punishment, there could be learning, growth, and even joy. Yet, Maka knew that the path ahead was uncertain. She had learned to survive, to adapt, and to find small victories, but she also understood that life was full of challenges she could not yet see. She carried her memories, her dreams, and her courage with her, and each day she grew stronger in spirit. She realized that while the world could be harsh, kindness and determination could carve out spaces of light, even in the darkest times. By the end of the season, Maka had begun to feel a tentative sense of belonging. Though she was far from her family and her village, she had built connections, discovered her own resilience, and found a friend in Tomas, someone who understood her in ways few others could. She still missed home, still longed for her parents and the familiar songs of her childhood, but she also recognized that this new life had its own lessons to teach, its own beauty to offer. Maka's story in this settlement was only beginning, and she knew that greater challenges and joys awaited her. She had learned that life was not only about punishment or hardship, but also about adaptation, courage, and the quiet discovery of love and friendship in unexpected places. With each sunrise, she felt a growing sense of hope, that perhaps, even far from home, she could find happiness, purpose, and a place where her spirit could thrive. As the seasons changed, Maka's life in the settlement grew more comfortable, yet she still felt a quiet longing for home. The fields were familiar now, and she had learned the rhythms of the household. She could carry water, cook meals, and tend to the animals with confidence. The children had grown used to her presence, often seeking her out for stories of her village, and even the older family members had begun to see her not as a punishment or an outsider, but as someone who brought care and thoughtfulness to their home. Yet, for all the comfort she had found, Maka could not ignore the growing closeness she felt with Tomas. Their small encounters by the river, their shared tasks, and the quiet conversations by the fire had slowly blossomed into something deeper. It was not yet love in the way stories often spoke of, but it was a connection that made her heart beat faster and her days feel brighter. She found herself thinking of him during moments of solitude, wondering what he was doing, hoping he was well, and secretly longing for the next time their paths would cross. One afternoon, a local festival brought the entire settlement together. The festival was a time of joy, with music, dancing, and the sharing of food. For Maka, it was also a chance to feel alive in a way she had not experienced since leaving her village. She wore a simple dress that had been given to her, braided her hair carefully, and walked among the people, feeling both nervous and excited. She noticed Tomas standing near the edge of the crowd, watching her with a quiet smile. He waved, and her heart leapt. She approached him, and they began to talk as they had many times before, but now the sounds of music and laughter surrounded them. For the first time, Maka felt a sense of possibility, an understanding that life could offer joy even in unexpected places. They danced with the children, helped the elders with small tasks, and shared stories under the fading sunlight. The festival became a memory she would treasure, a turning point where her heart began to understand that happiness could exist here, away from her family, yet still deeply meaningful. But not all moments were filled with joy. Some villagers and family members still whispered about Maka, questioning her place in the household. "She has been here too long," one neighbor remarked, "and she grows bolder every day." These words reached Maka's ears, and she felt the familiar pang of shame and self-doubt. Could she truly belong here? Was she doing right by her family and her people by embracing this new life? These questions haunted her as she walked home after the festival, the cool evening air doing little to calm her restless mind. Maka decided to speak with Tomas about her feelings. One quiet evening, they sat together by the riverbank, the water reflecting the colors of the setting sun. "I sometimes feel lost," she confessed softly, her fingers tracing the edge of the stone her father had given her. "I miss my family, my home. I don't know if I am doing the right thing by being here." Tomas looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Maka," he said gently, "you are not lost. You are learning, growing, and finding your own path. It is not wrong to care for your family, but it is also not wrong to care for yourself. You are strong, and your heart knows what it needs. Trust it." His words filled her with warmth and a new sense of courage. For the first time in weeks, Maka felt the tight knot of doubt loosen within her. Their friendship deepened further in the days that followed. Tomas began teaching Maka small skills that would help her in the household and beyond. How to mend clothes, how to track animals, and even how to navigate the nearby forest safely. Maka, in return, shared stories of her village, teaching Tomas the songs, games, and traditions that had shaped her childhood. Each lesson and story strengthened their bond, building a foundation of trust and respect. One morning, while walking through the fields to gather herbs, Maka and Tomas came across a young injured deer. Its leg was caught in a tangle of roots, and it struggled to free itself. Maka immediately knelt beside it, speaking softly, trying to calm it while Tomas carefully untangled the roots. Working together, they managed to free the deer and watch it bound away into the forest. They laughed with relief, their hands brushing as they worked. It was a small, ordinary moment, but for Maka, it symbolized the partnership and understanding that had begun to grow between them. A connection built not on grand gestures, but on shared effort, empathy, and care. However, with this growing closeness came new challenges. Some members of the settlement began to notice the bond forming between Maka and Tomas. Their whispers grew louder, questioning whether a young woman sent as punishment should become so close to a local man. Maka felt the tension, but chose to focus on her work and her small moments of happiness. She knew that rushing to defend herself or Tomas would only make matters worse. Instead, she relied on patience and the quiet strength she had been developing since her arrival. One afternoon, the elders of the neighboring settlement approached her. They were older women, wise and observant, who had been watching Maka for weeks. "You have a good heart," one of them said kindly, "but you must be careful. The choices you make now will shape the rest of your life. Walk with thought, but do not let fear guide you." Maka listened carefully, feeling both nervous and grateful. Their words reminded her that while she was finding joy, she also carried responsibility, not only for herself, but for the connections and trust she was building. Despite these challenges, Maka's heart continued to grow. She began to understand the depth of her feelings for Tomas, realizing that what she felt went beyond friendship. There was a gentle warmth in her chest whenever he was near, a sense of safety in his presence, and a happiness she could not ignore. Tomas, too, seemed to respond in kind, often seeking her out, speaking with care, and showing attention that went beyond ordinary friendship. Yet neither spoke openly of love. They both understood the need for patience, for careful steps, as their world was filled with expectations and traditions that required respect. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, Tomas and Maka sat by the river again. The water reflected their faces, calm and steady. "I think," Maka began softly, "that I am learning what it means to truly belong, even if this place is not my home. Maybe belonging is not about where you are born, but where your heart feels safe." Tomas smiled, reaching out to gently hold her hand. "I think you are right," he replied, "and I want you to know, Maka, that you are safe with me. I will walk with you wherever life takes us." Maka felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of hope, gratitude, and the stirring of a new kind of love, quiet, patient, and strong. As the days turned into weeks, Maka's confidence blossomed. She navigated the challenges of her new life with grace, learned to balance her loyalty to her family with her responsibilities in the settlement, and began to dream of a future where joy and love were possible. She realized that life was full of uncertainties, but it was also full of possibilities. Her heart had room for courage, kindness, and even love, and she was learning to embrace them all. But Maka knew that the turning point in her life had not yet fully arrived. While she had discovered friendship, connection, and the beginnings of love, she also sensed that greater challenges and choices lay ahead, moments that would test her courage, her resilience, and the strength of her heart. She understood that life could be unpredictable, that happiness required effort, and that love, though beautiful, also demanded patience and understanding. Even so, Maka embraced the present moment, finding beauty in small victories and joy in the simplest of acts, helping with chores, sharing stories, exploring the riverbank, and walking beside Tomas through fields and forests. She had learned that life could be kind even in unexpected places, that human connection could heal and strengthen, and that hope could flourish even in the shadow of uncertainty. By the end of this season, Maka felt a quiet transformation within herself. She was no longer the frightened, lonely girl who had first arrived at this settlement. She was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the complexities of life and love. She had begun to understand the depths of her own heart, the importance of kindness, and the quiet courage required to navigate a world that was often confusing and challenging. Maka's journey had reached a turning point, not the end, but a moment of awakening. She had discovered friendship, respect, and the beginnings of love. She had learned patience, courage, and the value of small acts of kindness. And as she looked at the river flowing gently before her, she realized that life, like the water, could move forward, carrying both challenges and opportunities, pain and joy, loss and love. She was ready to face what came next, with hope in her heart and Tomas by her side. The arrival of spring brought warmth and growth to the settlement, but for Maka, it also brought new challenges. Though she had begun to feel more at home and had developed a close bond with Tomas, not everyone accepted her presence or her growing connection with him. Some villagers, still wary of the young Apache woman who had been sent as punishment, questioned her place in the household. They whispered that she was too bold, too curious, and too independent. Though most of these comments were quiet, they carried weight. Maka felt their disapproval keenly, especially when she encountered them while performing her daily tasks. One morning, as she carried a basket of freshly gathered herbs to the kitchen, she overheard two women speaking in hushed tones. "She has been here too long," one said, her voice sharp with judgment, "and she grows closer to Tomas each day." "It is not proper." Maka felt a pang in her heart. She had worked hard to earn the trust and respect of her new family, but it seemed that no matter how careful she was, some people would never see her good intentions. For a moment, she felt the familiar sting of doubt and shame, the same feelings that had haunted her in the early days of her arrival. That evening, she confided in Tomas as they walked along the riverbank. "I sometimes wonder if I truly belong here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "No matter what I do, some people still look at me as if I do not deserve this life." Tomas squeezed her hand gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "Maka," he said softly, "you cannot control what others think. You can only choose how you respond. You have already shown courage, patience, and kindness. Do not let their doubts shake your spirit. You are strong, and you are capable of creating your own place in this world." His words gave her a measure of comfort, but the challenges were far from over. A few weeks later, tensions in the settlement escalated when a misunderstanding arose between Maka and one of the older women of the household. While preparing a meal, Maka had suggested a slightly different method of cooking a traditional dish, a method she remembered from her own village. Though her suggestion was meant to help, the woman misinterpreted it as criticism and scolded Maka sharply. The words cut deeply, and Maka felt a rush of shame and fear. She retreated to the quiet of the riverbank, her heart heavy with the weight of judgment. As she sat by the water, staring at her reflection, Maka reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the first days of loneliness, the struggle to adapt, and the moments of quiet courage that had allowed her to survive. Tears fell freely, but as she wiped them away, she felt a spark of determination. She would not let this setback define her. She would continue to work hard, continue to be kind, and continue to find her own way, no matter how difficult it might be. In the days that followed, Maka focused on her responsibilities, performing each task with care and attention. She helped the children with their studies, tended to the animals, and assisted Tomas in the fields. Slowly, the household began to see her resilience and dedication. Even the older woman who had scolded her began to nod in quiet acknowledgement, a subtle sign of respect. Maka realized that earning trust and acceptance required patience, perseverance, and a steadfast heart. Despite these challenges, Maka's bond with Tomas continued to grow. They spent hours together, sharing stories, exploring the forest, and learning from one another. Tomas admired her courage, intelligence, and kindness, while Maka valued his patience, wisdom, and gentle strength. Their companionship became a source of comfort and support, a safe space where they could share their hopes, fears, and dreams without judgment. One day, while gathering firewood in the forest, they came across a young bird that had fallen from its nest. The small creature chirped frantically, unable to fly back to its mother. Maka's heart went out to it, and she carefully lifted it into her hands. Tomas helped her fashion a small makeshift nest from twigs and leaves. Together, they returned the bird to the tree where it belonged. The experience, though simple, reinforced the bond between them. It was a reminder that compassion and cooperation could overcome challenges, and that even small acts of kindness could create deep connections. However, not all obstacles could be resolved with patience and kindness. One afternoon, a dispute arose between Maka and a neighboring family over a misunderstanding regarding the boundaries of their fields. Words were exchanged, and the situation threatened to escalate. Maka felt the familiar pressure of being judged and blamed, simply because she was an outsider. She looked to Tomas for guidance, and together they approached the neighboring family with respect and humility. Through careful explanation and compromise, they managed to resolve the conflict peacefully. Maka realized that challenges often required courage, diplomacy, and a willingness to listen as much as to speak. As the months passed, Maka grew more confident in her ability to navigate the complexities of her new life. She learned to balance her loyalty to her own family with her responsibilities in the settlement. She discovered that belonging was not simply about being accepted by others, but also about understanding and valuing herself. Each challenge, each moment of doubt, and each act of perseverance strengthened her spirit and prepared her for the future. Despite the growing acceptance of some in the household, Maka still faced moments of exclusion. Some villagers whispered behind her back, and a few children teased her for her different customs and accent. These moments were painful, but Maka learned to respond with patience and grace. She focused on the positive relationships she had built, the trust she had earned, and the companionship of Tomas, who remained a steadfast source of support. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Maka and Tomas sat together in silence. The day had been long, filled with work and minor conflicts, but they had supported one another through every challenge. "Life is not easy," Tomas said quietly, "but facing it together makes it lighter." Maka nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She realized that her journey was not just about adapting to a new place or earning acceptance. It was also about building connections, fostering trust, and learning the value of shared experiences. Over time, Maka began to feel a sense of quiet triumph. She had navigated conflicts, endured criticism, and faced her fears with courage and determination. She had strengthened her bond with Tomas, discovered her own resilience, and begun to create a life filled with meaning and purpose. Each challenge she overcame reinforced her belief in herself and in the possibility of happiness, even in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. Yet, Maka understood that life was not a series of victories alone. She knew that future challenges would arise, that misunderstandings could threaten the harmony she had worked so hard to achieve, and that love required patience, care, and courage. She also knew that she could not control the opinions of others, only her own actions and responses. This awareness gave her a sense of empowerment and clarity, allowing her to face the future with confidence. One spring morning, a message arrived from her family in her home village. They had heard of her journey, her struggles, and the kindness she had shown in the settlement. Though her parents had initially worried about her well-being, they expressed pride in her growth and resilience. Maka felt a rush of emotion, joy, relief, and gratitude. She realized that though she was far from home, she could still honor her family's teachings and values while embracing the life she had built here. The news brought both happiness and reflection. Maka thought about the challenges she had faced, the moments of loneliness, and the times she had questioned herself. She recognized that these experiences had shaped her, strengthened her, and prepared her for the future. Her bond with Tomas had deepened, her confidence had grown, and her understanding of the world had expanded. She had learned that life was not just about enduring hardship, but about finding hope, connection, and meaning in every moment. In the following weeks, Maka and Tomas continued to face minor challenges, but they approached each situation with patience, understanding, and cooperation. Their friendship had grown into a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. They discovered that love was not simply a feeling, but a commitment to care for one another, support one another, and face the world together. By the end of this period, Maka felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had navigated the complexities of her new life, earned respect and trust, and built a foundation of love and companionship with Tomas. She had learned to balance her own needs with the expectations of others, to respond to challenges with grace and courage, and to recognize the value of patience, perseverance, and empathy. Maka's journey through struggle and resistance had not been easy, but it had been transformative. She had faced criticism, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt, yet she had grown stronger with each challenge. She had discovered the depth of her own resilience, the importance of kindness and cooperation, and the beginnings of a love that could sustain her through the uncertainties of life. As the sun set on another long day, Maka sat by the river with Tomas, watching the water flow gently over the stones. The hardships she had faced were still part of her story, but so were the moments of joy, connection, and triumph. She realized that life, like the river, would continue to move forward, carrying both challenges and opportunities, pain and happiness, doubt and hope. And she knew that no matter what came next, she would face it with courage, resilience, and the support of someone who truly understood her heart. Spring had fully arrived in the settlement, bringing life and color to the fields and forests. Flowers bloomed along the riverbanks, birds filled the skies with song, and the air carried a sense of renewal. For Maka, the season reflected a deeper transformation within her own heart. After months of challenge, adaptation, and quiet perseverance, she had begun to find her place in this new world. Yet, she knew that the journey of acceptance, both for herself and with those around her, was not yet complete. Maka woke one morning with a feeling of resolve. She had spent long nights reflecting on the past, her journey from her home village, the lessons she had learned, and the relationships she had built. Most of all, she thought about Tomas, the young man who had walked beside her through every difficulty, offering understanding, patience, and companionship. She realized that her love for him had grown steadily, quietly, and surely becoming a guiding force in her life. That day, she decided to take action. She approached the household and gently spoke with those who had once doubted her, expressing her gratitude for their guidance and her desire to contribute meaningfully to the community. Her words were humble but filled with sincerity, and the reactions were telling. Some nodded thoughtfully, seeing the transformation in Maka's demeanor and work. Others softened, recognizing her commitment and genuine heart. Slowly, the air of tension began to ease, replaced by quiet acceptance and respect. Maka also knew that reconciliation with her own family had to come at some point. She wrote a letter describing her experiences, the growth she had experienced, and the bonds she had formed in the settlement. She spoke of her respect for the elders, her gratitude for her parents' teachings, and her understanding of the responsibilities she carried. When the letter reached her family, her parents read it carefully, tears in their eyes. They had feared for her safety, worried that being sent away as punishment would harden her spirit, but now they saw the resilience, courage, and wisdom that she had gained. Their pride in her filled her heart with warmth, and she knew that distance had not weakened their love, it had strengthened her own. One afternoon, Tomas joined Maka as she walked along the river. The sun sparkled on the water, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. "Maka," he said softly, taking her hand, "we have faced so much together. We have learned, grown, and supported one another. I want you to know that my heart is with you now and always." Maka felt a surge of emotion, a mix of joy, relief, and certainty. She squeezed his hand in return, her voice steady but tender. "And mine is with you, Tomas. I have learned that love is not just a feeling, it is patience, understanding, and the courage to face life together. I am ready to walk that path with you." Their relationship, once a quiet friendship, now blossomed into a profound love, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. They spent their days working together, helping the household, tending to the fields, and exploring the forests. Even the children in the settlement took joy in their companionship, often following them with curiosity and delight. The elders began to acknowledge their bond with quiet smiles, recognizing that love could flourish even in unexpected places, shaped by kindness, patience, and integrity. Maka also took time to reconnect with the community at large. She participated in festivals, helped teach the younger children, and shared stories of her own village. Through these actions, she not only strengthened her ties to the settlement but also created bridges between her heritage and the new life she had embraced. She realized that belonging was not about losing one's identity, but about weaving together the threads of past and present into a life of meaning and purpose. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange and purple, Tomas led Maka to a quiet hill overlooking the river. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the flowing water below. Tomas knelt on one knee, holding a small carved token in his hands. "Maka," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "you have shown me courage, kindness, and strength. Will you walk beside me for the rest of our lives, sharing both joy and challenge, love and friendship?" Maka's heart swelled. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of happiness, gratitude, and certainty. She nodded, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Tomas, I will." The news of their union spread through the settlement. Friends, neighbors, and even those who had once doubted Maka came to celebrate the love that had grown quietly, patiently, and truly. The ceremony was simple but filled with warmth and joy. They exchanged vows under the open sky, surrounded by the beauty of nature, and surrounded by people who had come to respect and care for them both. The children danced and laughed, the elders blessed them, and the air was filled with a sense of harmony and hope. After the ceremony, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Maka and Tomas continued their daily routines, supporting one another in work and in care for the household. Their love became a steady foundation, not always dramatic, but constant and reliable. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments, understanding that true companionship was built on mutual respect, shared effort, and the ability to face life's uncertainties together. Maka also found time for reflection. She often walked alone to her favorite spot by the river, remembering the journey that had brought her here, the days of fear and loneliness, the moments of doubt, the struggles to earn acceptance, and the quiet victories that had shaped her character. She thought of her parents and her village, feeling pride in the lessons they had taught her and gratitude for the resilience she had discovered within herself. She realized that life was not a straight path but a series of twists, challenges, and opportunities, and that happiness often came to those who faced it with courage and hope. In the following months, the settlement grew closer as a community. Maka's story became an example for others, of perseverance, kindness, and the transformative power of patience and understanding. People admired her for the way she had handled adversity, for the respect she showed to everyone, and for the quiet strength that had allowed her to thrive in a new environment. Her journey inspired both young and old, teaching that challenges could be overcome with courage, empathy, and determination. Maka and Tomas began to dream together of a shared future. They spoke of building a home of their own near the river, planting gardens, and raising animals. They imagined teaching future generations the lessons they had learned, lessons of respect, resilience, and the power of love that is patient and steadfast. Their dreams were practical but filled with hope, grounded in the reality of life but lifted by the joy of shared vision. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of gold and pink, Maka held Tomas's hand and reflected on how far she had come. She had been sent away as a punishment, feeling alone and uncertain, yet through resilience, patience, and the connections she had built, she had discovered a new life filled with meaning, love, and acceptance. She had learned that life's hardships could be transformed into lessons, that kindness could bridge differences, and that love could flourish even in unexpected places. Her parents eventually visited the settlement, and their reunion was filled with warmth, tears, and joy. They saw the life Maka had created, the love she shared with Tomas, and the respect she had earned from the community. They embraced her, proud not only of the young woman she had become, but also of the courage and wisdom she had displayed throughout her journey. It was a moment of closure, reconciliation, and celebration, a recognition that distance, challenge, and punishment had not weakened their bond, but had strengthened it in ways they could not have imagined. Maka realized that her journey was now complete, not because life had no more challenges, but because she had discovered the strength, love, and resilience to face whatever lay ahead. She had found a place where her heart felt at home, a partner who respected and loved her, and a community that valued her contributions. She had transformed from a frightened, uncertain girl into a confident, compassionate woman. As the seasons continued to change, Maka and Tomas built their life together with patience, love, and shared effort. They faced difficulties as life always brings, but they faced them side by side. Their love remained steady, a source of strength and joy, and their story became a quiet legend in the settlement, an example of courage, perseverance, and the power of hope. Maka often thought back to the day she was sent away as punishment. What had seemed like a cruel twist of fate had become the path to a life richer than she could have imagined. She understood that sometimes hardship is a teacher, guiding us toward growth, resilience, and unexpected happiness. She had learned that love was not only about passion, but also about patience, understanding, and the willingness to stand together through every trial. And so, Maka's life in the settlement continued, full of work, joy, friendship, and love. She walked each day with confidence, gratitude, and hope, knowing that she had found not only a home in the settlement, but also a home in her own heart. She had discovered the beauty of perseverance, the value of human connection, and the transformative power of love, a love that had grown quietly, patiently, and beautifully, ultimately leading her to a life of happiness, belonging, and fulfillment. Maka's story became a lesson for all who knew her, that even in the face of hardship one could find strength. Even in moments of doubt, one could find courage, and even when life seemed unfair, one could discover joy, love, and purpose. Her journey, though difficult, had led her to a place where her heart could finally rest, and she knew that the life she had built, with Tomas, with her community, and within herself, was a life of true meaning, beauty, and enduring love.